with the global financial crash, followed by austerity. We've had Brexit, COVID, we now have inflation, energy energy issues, climate change, and rapid issues coming down the line. These are not small things. They are not small challenges. And if you had one of them in a particular career that you're trying to overcome, you'd be doing well to spend some time on it. These things have happened in the last decade or so, and that's really challenging. And it really shows, and it's a testament to communities and the work that community groups do across the country, that actually places are still around and are still working, but they're not quite thriving yet, and we need to work out why.
We are in climate emergency, a code red for humanity, impending mass extinction. There's more carbon dioxide in our atmosphere now than at any other time in human history. The global surface temperature has increased faster since 1970 than in any other 50-year period in at least 2,000 years. But this isn't just an issue for other countries. We are witnessing the impacts firsthand. From floods and bushfires to coastal erosion and failed crops, the county of Pembrokeshire is far from immune to the impacts of climate change. Internationally, we have seen collective goals be set by those in power, most recently COP27, where heads of state, ministers and negotiators, along with climate activists, mayors, civil society representatives and CEOs met in Egypt for the largest annual gathering on climate action. They aim to tackle the climate emergency, from urgently reducing greenhouse gas emissions to building resilience and adapting to the inevitable impacts. But faced with a growing energy crisis, record greenhouse gas concentrations and increasing extreme weather events, the question remains, are those in power really doing enough to protect people and the planet?
The major thing is fossil fuels, but there's also farming, there's the fashion industry, there are all sorts of areas which have a direct impact on the climate crisis. And we need to hold those people, all those people, to account.
I think to reflect on why we are facing the latest potential catastrophe in the UK, seemingly in a never-ending list of crises. Undeniably, we've experienced the perfect storm, a number of factors coming together to make life more difficult. But for me, the main underlying reason stems from UK political decisions taken over the past 12 years, decisions that were and still are based on a particular type of political ideology. Despite Wales having a socialist government with socialist policies, this has resulted in an absolute escalation of inequalities in Pembrokeshire and Wales. We've seen cuts to services, we've seen a stagnation of wages and a disproportionate effect on the lives of working families, people with disabilities, minority groups, children and pensioners. Life looks particularly bleak at the moment. One thing is certain, is that we will have a lot to do in the coming months and possibly years to come to connect and support as more people experience financial difficulty.
My granny said that nothing worth fighting for comes easy. And responding to the challenges of our time requires change that often goes against the grain of some of the existing systems, requires immense effort, especially at this most difficult times.
So the question is, what happens when community power is mobilised? I wanted to share this with you because obviously what we saw recently, COVID-19, we had a global pandemic. And this brought what we might describe as being the worst of times, but it brought out the best in people. And they made use of all the assets that they got available to get through the crisis and help others get through the crisis. Within the first 48 hours of lockdown, we had 600 people putting themselves forward to volunteer. And we also had nearly 100 informal community groups that just sprang into being with the sole purpose of helping their neighbours to get through the crisis that loomed. And we, PAVS, and our other partners on the PSB and statutory organisations locally, regionally and nationally, we had to run to catch up with communities.
The cliche of Welsh communities is a product of the Industrial Revolution. It's a product of having lots of people who lived and worked close together. And that Industrial Revolution is often associated with the South Wales valleys. But actually, if you look across the economic history of Wales, it actually applied in large swathes of what are now known as rural Wales, which were actually also industrial centres in their own right, where people did a lot of work together. Now, that has inevitably changed as the economy has changed, and people's connections at community level have changed. And it probably particularly affected men in communities, because men were the people who used to work largely closely together. The nature of male work has changed an awful lot. And it's really interesting. The gender leadership of community has shifted massively from male to female over the last 50 years.
It's already been mentioned this evening. People get involved and they can contribute. And this places the economy back into the sphere of democratic influence, as its shape and form should be determined by the people who make it up. This is my final slide. And it's a call to arms in many ways. And it's that question of how do you actually make change happen? And so the first thing to say is that building a wellbeing economy needs everyone, with all their ideas, passion and practical delivery, however big or small. But the role of policymakers and government cannot be downplayed, and it's often where the incentives are created, money's brought in and money's deployed.
I think we've got an opportunity to do something remarkable with our communities. There's a shift in public sector thinking that's happening, so locally, Together for Change, but nationally there's a group called New Local who were, I think, at the kick-off meeting of the Ideas Unlimited event. We've heard from, I was speaking to a colleague from Health, just saw Steve Moore from Health. Well, there's a real desire within health as well to move to community-based health. We have to change things. That is, we want to support Pembrokeshire's communities, maintaining positive relationships with them to help build active, resourceful, connected, sustainable and creative communities. So that's going to go in our programme for administration that will be published in January. It sets out how we want to work with communities. Beyond that, there are some principles that I want us to focus on. And those are going to be community decision-making, involving communities and citizens more meaningfully in local decision-making. It's going to be collaboration with communities, so shifting the traditional public services top-down ways of working to more collaborative approaches which involve both our partner agencies and communities. And I want to see us help build community capacity, capability and confidence to help equip our communities to be able to develop the resources and skills they need to genuinely participate in local action.
So, onto the UK CRF project, talking about positive action and transformation. It was a third sector-led approach to creating a community-led wellbeing economy in Pembrokeshire, with a focus on the list that you can see here: natural and cultural assets, local food production, cooperative care opportunities, ideas to address poverty, business growth and employment, and infrastructure for the future planning. And you can perhaps see how these points of focus pick up on those 5 dimensions I mentioned a moment ago, which are dignity, nature, connection, fairness, and participation. And it's here that I'd really like to raise the flag again for the Resourceful Communities Towards a Wellbeing Economy project, because it took a really powerful vision, I feel, to bring together that diversity of projects. And it's been a real pleasure to work alongside others on some of those projects. And I think we believe, or I believe, it's really started the process rolling in terms of thinking about what a wellbeing economy could look like.
So for anyone who's not familiar with that term, microenterprise, it simply means a small, independent care support service. The definition of small is employing fewer than 8 staff. What they do, the services help people to live independently in their own homes and communities. And the big reason of why the project is here, why it's funded, and why we're supporting these very small micros are that they give people choice and control.
I think there are 2 or 3 bus services in Pembrokeshire that are commercially viable. Every other bus service is supported by the council and that can't go on. And we can't keep running big buses with 1 or 2 people on. It's not viable. So the service, the flexi service that we're helping, well, that we run in Pembrokeshire for the Welsh Government, is run by local people for local people. And basically you can call up the bus, and if you give them enough warning, they'll take you to or from wherever you want to go in that area for the price of a regular bus fare.
You don't get a decent standard of life if you don't have money to spend on food even, or heating even, back down to these incredibly basic things. But, you know, things like education or leisure time, all of that costs money. So the idea of a basic income is to sort of decide collectively as a society what basic is and what our basic rights are, and cover that income so those can be met.
So what does a social security system that provides a secure future for children and families look like? What does it feel like? And working together with families then to get those expert voices, they've come up with 6 key principles which apply to all elements of our work. So they want systems that are simple, timely, flexible. They want them to be able to promote individual autonomy, to treat people with dignity and respect, to give people a voice, to maximise incomes and to support people to have a greater understanding of what support is available, and to be right-based. And those are our overarching aims as an organisation. We want to provide families with a way of speaking up about what is important to them and really advocating for change and empowering them to use their own voice then through our own routes to Parliament.
The biggest project to date has been the launch of the Drop-In Community Cafe. We didn't expect it. It suddenly appeared on our socials page, and it's a testimonial from the daughter of one of the people who come regularly. And I think the very rare times that these things happen, you actually do appreciate that you are touching people's lives and you are making a difference.
So we decided to form a group that would consider almost any local project that somehow worked towards tackling the climate emergency and the biodiversity crisis and benefiting our community. We recognise that there are some great organisations already doing great work in the area, such as Pembrokeshire Coast National Park Authority, the Wildlife Trust and the National Trust, but we felt there was a real gap for listening to what the community wanted, what perhaps was needed locally, and actually how to get more local people involved.
We're doing a lot of land management skills training at the moment through some of our programmes. So we're supporting those sort of traditional rural skills, from coppicing to hedge laying, and we're also teaching people at the moment how to look after orchards, sort of expand that kind of scale of agriculture and horticulture, and other sort of land management skills. So, as I said, you know, one of our vision is to see sort of connection with nature. So biodiversity is a key theme of how we operate as well. So yeah, land management skills which can protect biodiversity as well as feed people.
We're now at the end of the 2nd year of our Connected Community project in Cymru. And in that time, we have been able to use some of the second homes council tax funding to fund 2 link officers who are able to, again, reach the parts that I can't reach. So I'm aware of my limitations as a councillor, and that sometimes people don't want to speak to the authorities if you're from the institution. But our 2 link officers are people who are rooted in the community. They work alongside me and the community council, and they're creating connections across our region.